So I just want to welcome everybody, and I just want to give everybody a little bit of an intro here. I'm Jason Slade. I'm the communications director with Revenue. Jennifer Hicks is actually going to be doing the presentation today. Jennifer, how are things?
They are good. Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Perfect.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I appreciate you all taking the time to join on to our meeting. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The intention behind this is to reach out to our new account holders who have opened up an account with us here within the last month. We're going to go over a couple of things with you. We will go over your filing requirements for being a withholding account holder within the state of Montana. And then we're going to go over our MW4 for tax year 2024 because it has changed. So you individuals who are new account holders, you're in a kind of a tricky spot because you are going to be using the 2023 information for these next months for November, December, and then you'll want to roll into this new information that we talk about for tax year 2024. Again, as Jason mentioned, my unit manager, Donna, is on the line as well, and she'll be monitoring the questions, and then at the end, we'll have time to hopefully go over those with all of you. So feel free to ask questions as we go. I just share my screen here. Okay. Can everybody see that okay, hopefully?
All good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jason. And so like he had, let me try to get this on my screen so you're not looking at the side of my head here. So the withholding unit is responsible for working with all the businesses within the state of Montana and any businesses outside of the state of Montana who have employees working within our state to go over what your filing requirements are. We'll help you with any questions you have. We're happy to spend any amount of time on the phone with you that you need and answer any questions that you have to help you file all your necessary paperwork. I will touch briefly on e-services. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because I want to make sure we have time to go over the new form MW4 for tax year 24. Again, people responsible for withholding within the state of Montana are any individuals who work here. If you are an out-of-state business and your employee is working in the state of Montana, you are required to withhold. We do have a change to that in 2024. Currently, we do not have a de minimis. What that means is that if you come into our state for 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 weeks, it really didn't matter. You're required to report any wages and withholding during the time that you're working in the state. It's beginning in tax year 2024, we did have a bill that was passed in legislation that now we, have a de minimis. And what that means is that beginning in 2024, if you have an employee who comes into the state of Montana to work and they're here for more than 30 days, so figure 31 days, within a year, you're required to go and report all the withholding for that time frame for the 30 plus days that they're in the state of Montana working. So what that does is that puts a little bit more on the employers as far as being responsible for reporting or for keeping track of when your employee is in the state of Montana working. And we say that because the way the bill was written is it's not 30 consecutive days. It's just 30 days within the year. For any Montana residents who work outside of the state of Montana, we ask that you defer to that state. We only want to collect withholding on wages that are earned in our state. And so if you have an employee who travels to, let's say, Washington or Idaho and does work in those states, you would want to defer to those states as to what their filing requirements are for the period in which your employee is working there. There's different types of compensation. They're pretty self-explanatory. Payment in kind, I usually reference payment in kind as like maybe you have a ranch or something and you have a young kid who works for you on the ranch, and instead of paying him wages, you give him a pickup truck. So at the end of the year, then you would need to report the value of that pickup truck as wages. Types of compensation not subject to withholding. Currently, right now, the big one for us is tip income. Please keep in mind that that will change for tax year 2024. So it's not required to have withholding for tax year 2023, but beginning in tax year 2024, all tip income is taxable to the state, as well as unemployment, which is currently not taxable. So there's a couple ways that you can register for a withholding account. You can file paper if you would like, or you can do it via our TAP website. We do recommend that you do it through TAP. The reason behind that is it's just a much faster process. So the turnaround time on you getting your account information is much quicker. Again, if you have wages that are issued on a W-2 with or without withholding, or if you have 1099s with withholding, you're going to want to report that on an MW3 and make sure you have a withholding account to report that information. Our withholding accounts are set up using your EIN. So if you do not have an EIN, you'll want to get one of those from the IRS before you reach out to us. Once you have registered, you'll receive a letter in the mail that gives you all of your account information and your filing requirements, which we'll go over here in a little bit. But you will also receive, because starting this year, we started sending out emails. So we're sending out email notifications to anybody who opens a withholding account, just to touch base with them, make sure that that account was intentionally opened, because you'd be surprised how many we get open in error. And just to walk through what those filing requirements are with you. You guys are actually the beginning of my pilot project to actually do these meetings with all new account holders. So I appreciate you guys all getting online. So we're going to start doing that as well going forward. Once you get that information, again, just review it. If you have a payroll provider, it's very important that you get this information to your payroll provider, especially concerning your filing status. All new accounts are considered monthly. And so what that means is that you're required to pay your withholding on a monthly basis. So it's very important that you do that so you don't assess any penalties or interest. To calculate withholding, for tax year 2023, our tables did decrease due to inflation. Tax year 2024, they will be decreasing again due to Senate Bill 399, which we'll discuss a little bit further here. And what Senate Bill 399 does is it kind of did an overhaul of our income taxes, and so it lowered our tax brackets and it lowered our withholding tables. Your calculation is based on your pay frequency, your wages earned, of course, and your allowances. The allowances is a big thing that we'll talk about again when we go over the 24 MW3, because that piece has gone away due to Senate Bill 399. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. So the MW4 I'm going to show you on this slide is our current MW4. So that is going to be for any new account holders who have employees during 2023. I know it may be a little bit frustrating, but we are asking you to complete the form again starting in tax year 2024, and I'll show you the reason for that here when we look at the newer form. Anybody who is submitting a request for more than 11 allowances or an exemption on our MW4, those forms they need to be submitted to the state of Montana for approval. We have a 24-hour turnaround. It's usually within the same day, if not the next day, on your exemptions or allowance requests, because we understand how important that is for your withholding. Please keep in mind we can't process any paper or MW4s. They all need to be submitted electronically through TAP, and that is a logged-in request. It's not anything you can do outside of having a TAP account. So if you are going to be submitting MW4s, it's important you have a TAP account. So this is what our MW4 currently looks like. As I mentioned, it is going to change for tax year 2024, so I'll show you that here in a bit. The big change is going to be that we no longer have that top section where it mentions the allowances. Instead, we're going to go to where we file, where we withhold based on your federal filing status. One thing I will mention on our MW4, because this will actually pertain to both years, is if you are requesting an exemption because you are a member of a tribe on a reservation that you live and work, we can't currently accept those with a P.O. box. It needs to be a physical address. And so if you don't, we understand that some reservations don't have physical addresses, they only have P.O. boxes. So in those situations, we would probably be reaching out to you and just asking you for either a copy of an ETM or their tribal membership card just to verify information.
Hey, Jen, we have one question that Donna was hoping you could answer live.
Okay.
Can you have multiple people tied to your TAP for your business?
As in being a user to file on your behalf, is that what they're asking? I'm assuming. If that's the case,
I would assume so.
Yeah, if that's the case, yes. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. You do have the option to have a third party report on your behalf, and you decide as the holder of that TAP account who has access and what that access entails.
Thank you.
Yep. So for every year, anybody who is reporting wages to the state of Montana is required to complete our form MW3. This is the form that we use to reconcile your account. This is what we use to verify any wages and withholding that were earned within the state of Montana. I'll show you the form here on the next page, and we'll go over the different sections as to how to complete that form. Again, anybody who is reporting any wages earned on a W-2 with or without withholding, or 1099s with withholding, will need that withholding account and will need to report on a form MW3. One thing to keep in mind is if you issue 1099s without withholding, those you do not need to have a withholding account. We do ask that you still report those to the state, but you're not required to have a withholding account to report those. So this is what our form looks like. It's a very easy form to complete. The top section, of course, is your account information and your name and address. It's really important that your name and address is up to date. We do have issues a lot with mailing where addresses get updated, but we don't get notified. So we do ask that you make sure that you do have the most up-to-date information on that MW3. The next section talks about whether you're amending the return or if you're no longer in business, and then it asks you to report a C-state. And then lines 1, 2, and 3 pertain to your filing of your 1099s and your W-2s and the amount that you have that you're reporting. And then line 3 is the total wages for all of those. Line 4 is the amount of withholding that you paid. So line 4 should coincide with with column C down below. And that should reconcile back. And then 4 is the total that you paid. And so, I jumped a line, I apologize. Line 3 is the wages that are reported. Line 4 is the withholding that you withheld on behalf of your employees. And then line 5 is what you paid. So line 4 coincides with column C, and line 5 coincides with column D. So if those don't reconcile, that return will error out. So it's important that that all balances back. And then, of course, line 6 is any difference if you underpaid or overpaid, what that difference is. If you are anticipating a refund, we get those out within 45 days of the due date of the return, which is the 31st of January. And so you should have a refund by roughly March 15th, I believe. Column A is the date of the month that withholding was earned. So if you are an accelerated filer and you have to pay withholding roughly every 2 weeks, then you're going to have 24 dates on there instead of 12 if you're an annual filer and you only report once, or a monthly filer. And then, of course, column E goes back to line 6. Line B is optional. I mean, you can fill that out, but if you don't, it's okay. because our system does keep track of when payments are received. Again, it's really important to make sure that recon schedule at the bottom matches to your balance up top, because if it does not, then those will stop in our system and it takes longer for us to get to those and be able to balance out your account. If you are a monthly filer and you report everything at the end of the year in, let's say, December, and you don't fill out that bottom section correctly, that will air out for us as well. And a lot of times you can end up with penalties and interest if it's not completed correctly. So it's important that that gets filled out correctly.
Hey, Jen, while you're figuring that out, we have a question. We are a North Dakota company and hired our first employee who lived in Montana.
Okay.
Who will work about 50-50 in Montana and North Dakota. Can
Okay.
we, or do we, opt to only withhold Montana taxes from his paycheck?
And you said he is a resident of Montana, is that correct?
Yes, it lives in Montana and who will work 50-50 in Montana and North Dakota.
That is an option. That's up to you. We do have a reciprocal agreement with North Dakota. And so between the two states, you can decide or work on with your employee on how they want that withheld. If you're okay with them just doing all their withholding to Montana, we're fine with that as well, or vice versa. You just want to make sure that because if they do report everything to North Dakota, then they would just end up on their IIT return, they would just note that they earned wages in another state. Hopefully that answered her question or his question.
Thank you. We're all caught up.
Okay. We have a not required filing type. Generally, your not required are going to be your ag accounts. Those are going to be, or a domestic, and usually domestic accounts I reference is like a nanny that comes into your home to take care of your kids. You have the option to choose whether or not to withhold on those accounts. You can decide to withhold. If you do decide to withhold, you are treated as an annual filer, and that withholding is due at the end is due by January 31st. If you choose not to withhold, that is fine as well. But please keep in mind, not required does not mean you do not have to report. You still have to report any wages earned by any employees that you have working for you. You're just not by law required to withhold on those wages. Every account holder will go through a look back period. All new accounts will probably not go through that for at least 1.5 years because you have to have at least 1 year of withholding payments, and it has to be for our fiscal year, which begins July 1st and ends of the current year and ends January 31st of the next year. And so what we do is we take a look at that, or sorry, I said that wrong, July 1st of the previous year to June 30th of the current year. And what we're doing is we're looking at the amount of withholding that you withhold for your taxpayers. And it's a withholding, it's the full amount. So it's not each individual that we're looking at, it's the full amount of withholding that you pay for that time frame. And then based on that, you'll get a letter from us that says either that you moved from, let's say, annual to monthly, which is one of our biggest ones, or you move from monthly to accelerated. And then once you get that letter in the mail, what we're doing is we're letting you know how to withhold going into the next tax year, not the current tax year. Those letters mail out October 1st. We run the report in October, and the letters are usually to you by November 1st. So we mail them roughly October 17th or so. So here's our payment schedule. So if you're annual, like I mentioned, your withholding is due at the end of the year. If you are monthly, it's due by the 15th of the following month. So January's withholding would be due February 15th and so on throughout the year. If you're accelerated, we match the IRS as far as what your filing requirement is with them if you're an accelerated filer. The different ranges that we're looking at as far as to determine that type is if you're $0 to $1,199, you're considered annual. If you're $1,200 to $11,999, you're considered monthly. And then anything above that $12,000 mark, you're considered an accelerated filer. So I'm going to roughly go and show you some things with our e-services because I don't want to run out of time before we can go over the new MW4. So I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit faster, but please feel free to reach out with any questions after we're done. Depending on how you signed up, you may have my contact information, and our contact information will be on one of these slides. We do encourage you to reach out if you have more questions. So eServices is responsible for all of our electronic filing for our MW3 and W2s. They're the ones that go through the testing process with our vendors every year. They're the ones that you would reach out to if you're having issues with those files for TAP. The withholding team can help you with like password stuff, but that's pretty much our limitation on that. We can do some research on files and see when we got stuff, but we're not able to dig too deep into those files. That would be more of an eServices situation. So I do talk a lot about TAP. We do encourage you to use TAP. Excuse me, it's a free service offered by the state of Montana, and I'll show you some screens here in a minute where you can file your MW3 and W2s. So it's really simple. If you're creating a file for the IRS, because you file electronically with them, you could turn around and submit that file to us as well through TAP. Some payroll vendors will submit those files for you depending on which payroll software you have. And again, they go through testing with our eServices every year to make sure those files come into us correctly.
Hey, before you get too far, it says we have one that says, can you repeat that about the type of filing amount to qualify for each?
I'm typing that up right now.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Thanks,
Go
Donna.
ahead and repeat it, but it'll also be in the chat.
The amount, is that what they're asking?
Correct. The
Okay.
annual amount, the monthly and the sum.
Okay, so your annual amount of withholding is $0 to $1,199. So if you're an annual filer, your withholding is due by the 31st of January. If you're a monthly filer, your withholding would be from $1,200 to $11,999. And that's when your withholding is due by the 15th of the following month. So January's withholding would be due by February 15th and so on throughout the year. You can pay as often as you want. You just want to make sure that monthly withholding is paid in full by the 15th. And then if you're accelerated, you're at that $12,000 mark. And we match up with the IRS. So how you file with the IRS, you could file with us at that same time. So here's a screenshot of our TAP screen. Excuse me. So when you get a letter from us, up there in the corner is where you would set up your login to have a TAP account. You do have to have a letter ID from us before you can do that. So if you're in the process and you really just want to get this done and you don't have time, because I know mailing can be a little tricky in the state sometimes, please feel free to give us a call. We're happy to give you any information on the phone as long as you are a contact for the account. One of the things I like to point out on this screen is in that business section is where you would file to register for a new account. Under the quick links is where you can make payments, submit any kind of returns or any information that we may have requested from you using that submit requested docs. The other thing I like to point out is the unclaimed property, especially if you are a resident of the state of Montana. Check that out. Throw your name in there. You just need your name and I believe your social. We house millions of dollars in unclaimed property, and we don't want to keep that. That doesn't belong to us, but we need people to come looking for it, for lack of a better word. So if you have the time, throw your information out there and just see if maybe there's something sitting out there, an old paycheck, an old banking account. Maybe you got a refund for something, you never cashed it. I found $400 out there. Some people have found thousands of dollars. So it is worth a check if you have any money floating around that maybe you just weren't aware of. This is a screen that shows where you can register for your tax account. And then again, the top arrow there showing where you would register for a TAP account once you get that letter from us. Again, the required information is going to be on that letter that you receive from us to set that up. So you'll want to give us a call if you're in the process of waiting for that letter or wait for that letter to come in the mail. TAP has a two-factor authentication, which you will set up when you first log in. Again, we can help with password resets and withholding, but that's about the limit we have other than searching for like payments or something that you may have submitted via TAP. Again, you have to file any MW4s requesting for 23 allowances or exemptions. for the current tax year, and then in 2024 it will only be for exemptions. Again, you'll want to submit those via TAP. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, and if we have any questions, we will reach out to you. And this just walks you through how you can request or file your MW4s. Here's the third-party access information. At the end of this presentation, there will be a screenshot of contacts, and there will have eServices contacts. If you are going to set up your TAP third-party access and you have issues, please reach out to them. They'll help you through that process. And again, this is where the nice thing about TAP is if you, let's say you're a payroll provider or accounting firm and you have 30 clients, we have what we call an account center, and you can get access to all 30 clients and you can have them all in one location. You don't have to log into each individual account and do whatever is necessary to file. You can do it all from one screen. We accept payments via TAP. If you use credit or debit card payments, there is a small processing fee, but I think that comes from the other side of things, not necessarily from us. E-checks, ACH, that sort of thing is all a free service. Again, you can report your withholding, file your MW3s and your W2s via TAP. Nice thing with the MW3s is if you make your payments via TAP, all that information will populate on your return when you go to file at the end of the year in TAP. So that's kind of handy. You don't have to remember everything. It will actually update that for you. But keep in mind, if you do any outside payments outside of TAP, that information will not pull in to your return. All of our files are in a text format. We do follow the IRS Pub 1220. So again, if you're filing, you know, with the IRS, your requirements will be similar for us. Just a brief summary of all the options via TAP. Montana Tax News you can use. If you are not registered for this newsletter, we recommend that you do so. The nice thing about it is that you can choose what you hear about, but with all the changes coming with Senate Bill 399 and everything that's being updated for tax year 2024, I would highly recommend, if you're not a part of this newsletter, that you do become a part of it. It's really easy to sign up. You just go to our mtrevenue.gov website. Down at the bottom of the screen, there's a subscribe button. You click on that, it'll ask for your email, and then you get to choose what you hear about, whether you want to hear about cannabis, or you want to hear about income tax, or you want to hear about withholding. You choose what we email you about, which is kind of nice, so you're not just getting a bunch of random stuff that doesn't apply to you. But I do highly recommend it because we do put a lot of new information out there via that newsletter. I think Donna's been keeping up on the questions. Here's the contact screen. I'll leave that up here for a minute so people can take a quick shot of that or jot anything down. Again, I work with a wonderful group of people. There are 11 of us on the withholding team. They are more than happy to spend 10 minutes, an hour, whatever, even come visit you in person if necessary, or have you come visit us here. We're more than happy to work with you to make sure that you remain compliant with the state of Montana. If you have any questions, especially coming into 24 with our new MW4, our team is trained up on that. We're happy to help you. Please keep in mind, we're not here to guide you on how to file your taxes, but we'll help you on how to complete the necessary forms for your withholding, like the MW4. I recommend calling our loop line, which is the 444-6937. The other line is the main department's call center, but sometimes depending on the time of the year, they're really, really busy, and so you may have to wait a little bit. And so we do recommend that if you have just a specific withholding question, that you reach out to us directly, just to hopefully get you on and off the phone a lot quicker. And our email is listed there as well. And then down below is where the eServices email, and they will reach out to you and work with you to answer any questions that you have. Top section just shows you our website along with our TAP website. All of our information is on our MT Revenue website. We update our employee tax guide every year. It usually comes out roughly October, November timeframe. any form updates, that sort of thing are all out there. So if you have time, it's a pretty cool website. Go out and take a look. A lot of times there'll be some videos out there on how to do certain things. Hopefully we'll have some coming for withholding here in the near future. So with that, I'm going to bring up my other presentation here really quick. Can you see the MW4 2024? Do I got to stop sharing?
Not yet. We're still looking at the last slide.
Okay.
So you may have to stop sharing that particular screen and then bring up your other one.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. 1 second here. All right, this is not working for me.
While she's getting that all set up, we do have a webinar going on tomorrow at 9 o'clock. That's withholding update for tax year 2024. So if you have not registered for that or you do not know about that, go and check out our website. That'll be going on tomorrow, same time as this one. And we'd sure like to see everybody here showing up for that one, as long as it applies, and you'll learn some new stuff.
Is it still not sharing? Jason?
It's not sharing?
I'm asking, is it there?
No.
Okay. Why is it being... I'm sorry, for whatever reason, this one doesn't want to participate with me.
Can you share the presentation that you're gonna do tomorrow that has the MW4 on there?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to bring up, and it's being... No, I think I can here. Yep, I think I got it now.
All right, there we go.
Yeah,
You're
sorry
doing it.
about that. All right, so 2024, our MW4 is changing. Please keep in mind this is beginning January 1 of 2024. So again, the one I previously showed you is the one that applies for any employee in 2023. I know we're getting down there. We only have a few more weeks before we're into 24, and so I apologize for the new account holders. I know it's going to be a little bit of a tricky situation for you guys, but we are here to help you through that.
And Jennifer, if you want to just shut down the little hide thing at the bottom of your screen. There you go. Good deal.
Okay, thank you. All right. So reasons to complete a new form MW4. So if you are a current account holder and you do have employees, I just want to start by saying we cannot force you to complete this new form. We do highly recommend that you complete the new form. And the reason behind that is, again, the allowance piece has gone away, so there's no longer allowances. And so we are going to withhold based on your filing status, your federal filing status. Another thing that has gone away for the state of Montana is we will no longer have the SEP same. So filing joint separately on the same form goes away. You don't have the option to do that any longer. Itemizing for the state of Montana has gone away unless you itemize for the Fed. So you would have to itemize with them first before you would itemize with us. So that's just a couple of things that are changing in 24. So, and again, our tax rate lowered. They went from 6.75 down to 5.9 beginning in tax year 2024. And again, your tax rate's based on your filing status. The reason behind these changes was legislation, I believe, was trying to put more money in our pockets from pay period to pay period. So if you are not to change your MW4 for tax year 2024, the odds of you over withholding are pretty good. We can't guarantee that because we don't know your tax situation, but your chances are pretty good that you may over withhold. So we do recommend, if you want those monies in your pocket from paycheck to paycheck instead of at the end of the year, that you do complete this form. Some other reasons is you have a new job, you have multiple jobs. So it's really, we have a multiple job worksheet that you'll need to complete. You're married or divorced, maybe you get a large bonus or something at the end of the year, that sort of thing. Our requests, our exemptions are still current. Those did not change. So if you're an enrolled tribal member, like I mentioned earlier, National Guard member, North Dakota reciprocity, which I mentioned a little bit ago, or a non-resident spouse of a military member, you can request those exemptions via TAP. Excuse me. And then we'll respond to you and let you know whether or not they're approved. So here's an example of what our new MW4 looks like. Again, the top section on the old one where we were doing the allowances has gone away. The exemptions are still there. They're in that line 5. I'm going to go through, I have screenshots through the presentation. We're going to go through each section one at a time so that you guys can see those clearly and understand what it is that we're requiring on those forms. So again, the top section is just, your employees' information, so their name, their address, that sort of thing, social security number. Again, we are requesting a physical address, but we do understand that in certain situations on reservations, there is not a physical address. And so in those situations, if you put a PO box in there, we will be reaching out to either get that ETM form or a copy of their tribal card. We're hoping in the next year to make some changes to the MW4 process and actually have an attachment function within that request, so you can just attach that information at that time. But unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to get that completed this year. So the first question is your filing status. Again, we are asking you to fill this out based on your federal filing status. So you have your main, your main filing status is single, married filing separately, married filing jointly, qualified widower, or head of household. So those are pretty self-explanatory there. Question 2, married filing jointly with both spouses working. So in this scenario, if you and your spouse have a similar, are both making roughly the same dollar amount in wages, you can just check this box here, this box 2. If you and your spouse have a significant difference, and by significant, we roughly use about $10,000. So if there's a $10,000 difference between what you make and your spouse makes, you're going to want to select box 1B and then do your multiple jobs worksheet. I do have some examples throughout the slides of that multiple jobs worksheet. And so hopefully that will kind of help clear up some things. If you do have a more in-depth question than what I go over today, again, feel free to reach out to us and we can go over that with you one-on-one, because we do understand everybody's situation is different. Question 3, this is going to be extra withholding. So in this scenario, this could be, let's say you just like to have a little bit of a buffer every year. And so you like to just have an extra $25 per paycheck. You would put that on line 3. Let's say you do have multiple jobs, that would go there on line 3 as well. And I'll show you that example here in a minute. Retirees that have 1099-R income, we have ran into scenarios where some businesses do not want to do the withholding for every state. And so if they don't want to do Montana withholding, but you should have withholding because you're going to owe if you don't, you can do a calculation based on our table and determine how much withholding that you want withheld out of that. Keep in mind this line 3, it's going to be every pay period. So it's not for the whole year. You would split that out and determine how much each pay period you want withheld. The other thing to keep in mind, like I had mentioned earlier, unemployment payments are now taxable to the state of Montana beginning in 2024. So if you want withholding on those, or you want to determine what you should withhold based on those unemployment payments, you could put that here on line 3 as well. Question 4 is one of the bigger ones we get questions on. So if you have questions on this, don't feel bad. So what this is line 4 is going to be the amount of withholding per paycheck that you tell us or tell your employer you want withheld. So if you put something in box 4 or line 4 here, they are only going to withhold what you put on line 4. They're not going to look at your filing status. They're not going to look at any other information. They're just going to look at what's on line 4. So it's really, really important that you are absolutely certain in what you want on line 4. If you know your tax liability down to the penny and you know exactly what withholding you have to have, you can put that in there. We aren't recommending that, but we can't tell you not to, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. The other thing that I want to make sure people understand is if you put 0 there, there will be absolutely no withholding. So if you don't intend to put a 0, you may want to just double check. As employers, I can't tell you have to do this, but I would highly recommend for this first year, if you have an employee who puts a 0 there, maybe just double check that that's what they meant. Because the last thing we want is for anybody to have any tax liability at the end of the year if we can help it based on this line 4. So please keep in mind whatever you put in that line is what is going to be withheld. They're not even going to look at your filing status. Some people may use this because they may know they have a bunch of credits, and so by the time that they file at the end of the year, they really don't have a need for withholding. So, I mean, we do understand things like that happen, but just please be very cautious of that, again, because we don't want you to have a tax liability at the end of the year. Depending on your tax situation, please keep in mind, I don't know anybody's tax situation, so everything I talk about is just a brief overview. It's not a definite do this, do that type situation. So here's our multiple jobs worksheet. If you have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, so if you had 2 jobs, then you would start with line 1 and fill out your information. The more jobs that you have, the more complicated this might get, and so that is why we suggest if you have questions when completing this, please fill it out, or please give us a call. We're happy to walk through it with you. Line 3 is going to be based on your pay periods. That's what you would divide like line 1 by, and then line 4 would be what goes on line 3 of the previous page. So now I'm going to show you guys some examples with some multiple job type situations, and just kind of walk you through how we got to that point. Again, these are just very simple situations. There's no outside tax liability, or excuse me, tax situation really. It's just solely based on wages. We're not looking at anything else in these examples. So please keep that in mind. So in my first example, you're a single taxpayer. You have 2 jobs. So your first job is roughly $70,000 and your second job is $20,000. So what you would do is on the higher paying job section, you would look at that 70,000, you bring it over to the 20,000 column of the lower paying job, and where they intersect, that would be your extra withholding. This withholding amounts for the entire year. So you would take your 1,046 divided by a number of pay periods depending on what your pay period situation is. And in this case, it's every other week. So we divide it by 26, and that gives you roughly $41. In our instructions, it tells you to round everything up. So you'll want to make sure you follow that. So this $41 would be what I would put on line 3 on the front of my MW4. That would be the extra withholding that my supervisor, or excuse me, my higher paying job would withhold for me. And then, so what they would do is they would withhold based on my filing status, and then they'd add that extra $41 every pay period. So now on this next screen, I'm going to show you, and just so that you're aware, if you have a copy of the MW4, this table here is in the back after the instructions. So we give you the tables for the multiple jobs in the instructions with the MW4. So if you were to look at my example, based on our table up top there, the first $562 would not be taxable. And then excuse me, I jumped ahead, I apologize. So if you look at your taxpayer biweekly wage there, for $70,000, if you were to break that up by 26 pay periods, it's roughly $26.93. And then the second job, if you were to take that $20,000 divided by 26, that's roughly $770 a pay period. Excuse me. So if you add the two together, that's your $3,463. So the total of the $90,000 in wages. So if you were to look at the table up above, we're not going to tax 562 of that. But then the next 788 of it is going to be $37 a pay period. And then the remaining 2,113 is going to be 125. So basically your total withholding every pay period based on the 3,463 is going to be $162. So that's one of the ways to compute what your withholding or your tax liability would be based on your wages. So then to turn around and then calculate your withholding piece of that, if you were to take your 2,693 and you come over to your table on the right, which is going to be down there at the bottom, and you have to go to the single column, which is your first column there, that's $117 per pay period. And then if you were to do the same for the $770, which is up top on that table on the right, and you have the $12 there, which it would be your withholding every pay period for that job. So then if you combine the two, you're under withholding because your total withholding is only $129. So then if you turn around and take into consideration the $41 that we are picking up due to our multiple jobs worksheet, you're actually going to withhold a little bit above. It ends up being 150, I think. No, I can't do math. 170. So you actually end up over withholding, which is a good thing. So basically the way to look at this is either you fill out that multiple jobs worksheet and make sure you withhold enough every pay period, or by the end of the year you may owe money, the difference of that 162 and 129. So then in my second example, I am going over a spouse situation. So spouse A makes $100,000 and spouse B makes $60,000. So if you look at the table off to the right, you would take the $100,000 on the high paying job column, look at the $60,000 for the lower paying job, and where they intersect is that $2,212. In this situation, we're looking at them as a weekly filer, or excuse me, they get paid weekly. And so you would take the 2,212 divided by 52, and that's roughly $43 a pay period. So then that would go back onto line 3 of your withholding, or excuse me, of your MW4. It would go back on line 3. So then they're going to withhold based on your filing status and an extra $43 every pay period. We do recommend that you put this on the higher paying job. However, it's up to you who fills this out. But keep in mind, not both people would need to do that multiple jobs worksheet. Just one spouse would fill it out on their MW4, whichever one you prefer do that. So then back to my example again. If you were to take the $100,000, divide it by 52 weeks, it's roughly 1924 pay period. So then if you come over to the chart here, that's roughly $76 because that would be the middle column there, excuse me. And then if you were to take the $60,000 and divide that by 52, that's roughly $1,154. And so if you look at total together, that's $3,078. So if you look at the table up above, that first $562 is not taxable. The next 788, which is the 1,350 minus the 562, is $37. So then you'll have that extra 37. And then the remaining 1,728 is 102. So what ends up being is your liability for every pay period is 139. So then if you go down to your withholding tax calculation there, if you were to take that 1924 over to your table on the right, and you take that middle column because you're married filing joint, that would be $76 a pay period. And then for the second job, the 60,000, you would take that 1,154, bring it over to the table on the right, and that's in the middle column, $31 a pay period. So your tax liability ends up being 139 a pay period, but you're only withholding 107. But because now you're withholding that extra 43, I think it was on the other page, you end up withholding 150. So you're actually withholding enough to cover your tax liability for your jobs. If you were not to fill out that multiple jobs worksheet, then you would end up having that tax liability possibly, depending on your tax situation, due at the end of the year. Hopefully I didn't make that too confusing. Do we have a question? Yep.
Jen, there's a question in regards to, for 2023, if I hired an employee in November, would an MW4 need to be completed? The department does not require you to submit the MW4 unless they're have greater than 10 allowances for 2023 or withholding exempt. But we strongly suggest that you have them fill the MW4 for you to retain for your records to determine their withholding. Same as 2024 is that we do not require the MW4s to be submitted to the department unless you're withholding exempt. It's just something to have for your records to determine how you're going to withhold. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. And so then the next section of the form, of course, is going to be your exemption section. So this, like I mentioned before, our exemptions didn't change from year to year. They're still the same. But please keep in mind, any request for an exemption is an annual request. So even if you do at the beginning of this year, you have to turn around it again, or excuse me, the beginning of 24, you would have to do it again in 25. It's an annual request. It doesn't go once you do it once, you're just good for however long you're there. It's a request you have to fill out every year. Again, we're asking for a physical address, and if not, we'll reach out to you and try to get some more information to help us determine whether or not to approve or deny an exemption. One of the things that we'll be changing again as well in 2024 is we are currently right now, if there is an exemption that's denied, a letter goes out to the employee as well as the employer. Going forward, it will only go out to the employer beginning in 2024. So just an FYI, if your employee will no longer receive a copy of the letter if there is a denial. And again, all exemptions need to be requested via TAP. We don't accept paper. If you do send in a paper MW4, we'll probably be reaching out to you to ask you to do it on TAP. And if you need some assistance with that, we're happy to help. And then the bottom section, pretty self-explanatory. It just needs to be signed by the employer and the information completed, or excuse me, signed by the employee and the employer information completed with the EIN and account ID. Okay, with that, I am all done. If you do have more questions, again, please feel free to reach out. You have a loop line for the withholding team. They all are a very great group of people, and they will help you through your questions. We do anticipate that there will be some questions on this. Also, I have offered to travel. I am offering to do Zoom meetings with just you individually with your companies if you'd like. We just want to make this as easy as possible on everybody. So whatever we can do to assist you, please reach out to us and let us know. We're more than happy, like I said, to travel and do some presentations if that will help, or answer questions that way as well. So thank you for your time. I do appreciate it.
All right. And with that, thank you guys so much. This will be recorded Just as kind of like a back end kind of a secret here, the Zoom client takes about 24 hours to have a turnaround. So if you miss part of this presentation, you won't probably be able to watch it today, but probably tomorrow by the time we get the recorded version from Zoom. It takes about 24-hour turnaround. But other than that, we do have other webinars that are on our website, so check those out. And if not, maybe I'll see you tomorrow. And until then, have a good day. Jennifer, thanks so much for having us, and we will see you later. And I will be ending the recording right now. So thank you so much, folks. See ya.
Bye.